Today is a beautiful day for science. Currently, we're seeing a farewell series of flares from region 3098, beginning with M-7.94 class flare at 0949 UTC on 16 September 2022, followed by an M-6.25 at 1559 UTC on the same date. The area has always been very high potential, but has not displayed a lot of that due to the nature of how the loops were mostly arranged in such a way that they were not colliding or reconfiguring. And these flares are the impact of a magnetic field line running into another. And what's beautiful about this event is we can actually see that where these events are colliding. So taking it in frame by frame here, let's go back to Angstrom 131, which is the light blue sun filter. Right there, you can see the beginning of where two magnetic field lines have just crossed. And it gives a very loud microwave frequency, just completely shouting to the world, as it were, quite literally to us. And so we get to see that. And this is of the 0949. So we see the incitement of that event, and there is when it falls out. And then finally, due to that beginning as a catalyst, we then see a trigger to escalate to a much more significant M-7.94, which was the peak of that event. And then later, here we go again. We can see, again, flaring activity here. And there's a loop crossing over this little flare. And then there's this. As we continue, right there, same spot. So that little flare that occurred underneath that loop, it was the catalyst. And then you can see this 6.25 M-class flare escalate into what we see here. I consider this a really good event because we can actually see the catalyst that causes these larger flares. How they're not just suddenly there's a large flare. It's a lot of flares occurring. And as that occurs, it becomes more and more significant until we end up with an onslaught of frequencies at very high intensities being shouted out. As is, when looking at these flares, we can see they're actually both relatively clean flares. These have very little plasma displacement, meaning that if any CME activity has occurred due to these flares, they're going to be from anything above that region. So I'm not seeing any displacement. There's a little bit there, but it comes back down. So yeah, I'm not seeing any actual displacement from these. So as of right now, I'm not seeing any actual coronal mass ejections, just very minor amounts of plasma movement, and it's mostly just a rearrangement of those magnetic field lines, those coronal loops. So again, today we had the two M-class flares from 3098. 3098 does have an X-class potential, but not necessarily something I would expect. Its biggest issue was that the loop arrangement that it has had has maintained a stability that prevented from flaring activity, despite the fact that the region was still quite mixed with polarity, a lot of crossing of loops that had a high potential, and we're just now seeing some of that play out. But it may be maybe a few days to a week out from seeing this actually escalate to be its full potential or provide its full potential if it does so. As is, it's just a great farewell from region 3098 as it's rotating off the Earth-facing disk, portion of the Sun that's viewable by the Earth. And that's the update. Cheers and science on.